So first of all, I have failed at making a ponytail before starting this video. Most of it is back there, but we've ended up with some falling back into place on the side, yet honestly, I'm liking the look that it's created. It's giving me vibes similar to Council of Geeks, her hair, although there's obviously other major differences, but just having it down on that side. And either way, it's something new and fun, and that's just explaining why I look like this time. And secondly, yes, we are still doing a video today, despite everything that's been happening the last few weeks with all making that, because I want to make sure that this still keeps on schedule regardless. Although by that same token, this is going to be hopefully a shorter one than some other usual ones. But either way, to the topic of the video itself, we're going to be talking about today something from the latest book, Celestial Coup. Now, it hasn't been a month since release yet, although very close, so regardless by my rules I wouldn't be speaking about spoilers. However, even if that wasn't the case, I probably wouldn't want to be specifying certain details in this anyway, because they are a part of a reveal in the book itself. So either way, as we discuss this piece of technology and science that I want to talk about, because I think it'll be interesting to talk about, yes, there will just be a couple of things where I won't give a certain term or, as I say, specificity, just to make clear why that's the case. With that established though, if we're just to begin, hello and welcome to the Ragnarök Chronicles. My name is Dominic, and as that just established, this is a channel where we just talk about the lore of the books that I am writing. Now, I actually also just want to give the disclaimer that what I'm about to describe here is basically as it is explained in the book itself. I'm not really adding too much extra detail. I may phrase it in a slightly different way, but yeah, this is just verbalising it, discussing it as I say. So if you do read the book, then this will basically be the same information back to you. If you haven't got that far, however, and maybe you just aren't as familiar with the series as a whole, either by the books or the videos on this channel, which again you can after this go back and check others to explore the lore that I have broken down so far. If you're not as familiar with certain elements from how the multiverse of the Ragnarök Chronicles works, I am just going to talk through an important element in the context of this topic, first of all, before again we actually get onto the main thing itself. So, per the books, we here on Earth live in a part of the multiverse referred to as the Alpha Realm, and this is a dimension that is comprised of a massive number of bubble universes, which I can't now think of off the top of my head because I didn't think to prepare to look up what the number was, but I will have now put it at the bottom of the screen. But a massive string of bubble universes, each of which is static and only minutely different from each one to the next, or rather, each aspect of it is going to have a difference, but those differences are going to be extremely minor. And how we then perceive motion in reality is that our souls, as we might think of them, or our Beaureia energy, they are moving down the chain of universes one at a time at an extremely high rate, such as for us, it would seem like a stop motion film essentially, or a very high quality one with a very high frame rate. So we perceive everything as fluid motion. And even as part of this though, we still technically have free will. To an extent it's a little paradoxical, but the point is the nature of each universe in the chain is determined by an algorithm in the baseline of reality to make sure that each difference as the next universe goes along is the one that would be the most likely to happen. So based upon our consciousnesses, based upon how we think, how we usually act, it determines, okay, this person will probably do this next. So whatever we would decide per our free will is then what happens. I've talked about this before in the Explaining the Multiverse video, probably, and certain other ones anyway. If not, regardless, watch the Explaining the Multiverse video, because that talks about the multiverse as a whole. Another part of the multiverse that you'll cover in that is then the other part we'll talk about here, is the inner region. Now, the inner region is basically the same structure in terms of it's a string of bubble universe is static and soul's moving through the circuit, albeit theirs is going in the opposite direction. So the first universe in the chain for us in the alpha realm is the last universe in the inner regions chain. And to be clear, when I talk about chain, it does then loop back around to a beginning of a timeline, essentially, which is marked by what we consider the Big Bang, or on our level, the Big Bang. In terms of the multiverse, there's a couple of different levels on which you have Big Bangs, and that's a whole other thing. But anyway, so theirs are going in the other direction, and theirs is a slightly different type of matter. So when we think about atoms, we usually think of them as, well, from our perception as far as we can tell, they are mainly empty space. Well, again, that's from our perception. In fact, at least some of that other space is taken up by the inner regions atoms, but as I said, because of their different composition, we cannot perceive them here. And if the two kinds of matter, two types of atoms, were to succeed in coming into contact, it would be essentially the same as matter meeting antimatter. They would annihilate each other. So because of this, the other type of matter, first of all, is harder to access from outside of these dimensions, because you also have the outer region and the beta realm. If someone from the outer region was trying to come into our bit of space, it would be a lot easier for them to enter the alpha realm rather than the inner region, so ours is a plane of reality that usually gets interfered with. So there's that element, but also, again, because you have throughout reality these different atoms that are trying to occupy the same space, and even in what might otherwise be seeming a vacuum, you still have some kind of reality of the alpha realm and the inner region still there to an extent between all of these molecules or whatever's composing that part of each dimension. You then have between them, generated by the friction of those atoms trying to coexist but not being allowed to touch, this layer of energy called Spec. Now, Spec could be considered a fifth plane of the multiverse itself, depends on how you look at it. It's not really one that you enter per se, unless, say, you were to blow a massive rift in the skin of reality that led from the edge to the centre that then isn't perceivable from any other direction, but that surely wouldn't happen outside of a massive conflict for dominion over the realities of the multiverse. But whatever. Besides that, it's usually one that you're not going to be entering, yet still, because it is so pervasive and it is distinct from the alpha realm and the inner region and everything else, it can be argued to be a fifth layer. But this layer of purple, as we would perceive it, Spec. With that established, that's basically the background knowledge you need to understand, we can now come to this technology in the book itself, which isn't actually named. There isn't like a specific term for what is being done here. Maybe something like Spec kinesis, because that rolls off the tongue. If you have any ideas after hearing this or reading the book yourself, when you get round to it, be sure to let me know in the comments below or anything like that. But regardless, it doesn't matter too much because, again, it didn't need to be named in the book, otherwise I would have come up with it already, and it's not going to be the title of this video because I need to title it something that's vaguely searchable. But whatever it is, what we then have is an extrapolation upon a notion of, if this layer of Spec energy, this friction, exists because of the atoms interacting with one another, and the motion of the atoms, etc., influences Spec, could we work the other way, wherein if we had a method of manipulating the Spec energy lining, could that then influence the atoms on the other side of it? So with that notion, if true, which is correct in this book universe with technology that is far beyond ours on Earth, it would be affecting the atoms of both the alpha realm and the inner region. The people who are doing this, who are remaining anonymous per the I'm not going to spoil certain elements of the book, they're not really caring about what may be on the inner region side of things at this point. We don't know what's happening there. In fairness, statistically, it's probably empty space on their side of reality, but whatever, doesn't matter. We're just focusing on the impact on the atoms on our side, on the alpha realm. While, if you were to do this, if you were to generate a broadcast of waves on a certain level which interfered specifically with the Spec that is hidden throughout all of the skin of our reality, and you cause the Spec therefore to fluctuate in certain ways that would move the atoms around it, this would still be on an extremely minute scale, because an atom gets shoved a tiny bit this way. However, the notion is that if you had a lot of these happening to a lot of atoms, and then at an extremely fast rate, so you have like one motion, extremely fast, at a fast enough rate, probably in line with the rate at which we're moving through the universes in the chain itself, which again is at such a rate that we as humans with all our technology can't perceive that there would be any staticness to it, then yeah, that's going to cumulatively build up to what would appear to be fluid motion of all of the atoms in that given area moving a certain way. We talk about this broadcast of waves and this design. That would presumably need to be something by a supercomputer, or rather, again in the anonymous context in this book, you have one specific mind that is meant to be powerful enough that is coordinating all of these different operations. So from this telepathic psychic field that's connecting into the machines that are conducting this hijacking of the nature of reality, into these machines that then compute what is needed and then send out the broadcast waves targeted at specific points in Spec to get the atoms to move certain ways, and you end up with these ultimate motions. What this is then used for in the book, at least, and I don't believe there's any intentions of the technology appearing again, so this is the only example of it being used, but in theory you could use other things. Point is here, it is being used for construction. We have here, say, as a basic example, you had some heavy loads that needed moving from here to here, where they could then be assembled. Well, just get the Spec to push the atoms of the thing you need moving and basically shovel it through the air over there. It doesn't matter about gravity in this case, or air resistance in this case, because the origin of force of motion in this case is coming from within the atoms themselves, and it's within the very baseline of reality in turn. It is going to supersede anything else that might try to do it. So in this way, we can end up with essentially telekinesis, hence I suggested Spec kinesis before, that defies any other laws of physics that might otherwise be binding the motion of these objects. You move things from here to here, then in a more complex sense, once the bits of apparatus are where they need to be, you can have them move into position and connect together and react in certain ways as is necessary. And thus, for this massive scale construction of a piece of architecture, a larger machine, or whatever it is in turn, but again, you'll find out if you read the book, this can all be happening with all the components moving about each other and connecting together in ways that then don't require any other workforce. You're probably going to have some people around to make sure everything's working okay, to monitor and verify that it's all going together correctly, but you don't need people to then operate the machinery in turn, to move things, to connect things. That's all being monitored and controlled by this central mind that is determining how everything should be. So in a way here, you have a construction of a physical product that will exactly match how the architect is imagining it. There won't be any compromises or changes from initial conception to then actually practically putting everything together, which would in turn probably mean passing things on to other people who will interpret the instructions in their own ways. Now, there is a direct connection between how the person who wants it built is seeing it and how it is then executed. And we can assume that with a mind that is powerful enough to coordinate all of these different things, that's also going to be a mind that's clever enough that it's not going to be making structural mistakes, because you could say that, oh, I could imagine how a spaceship is going to come together, but because I'm not an engineer, if I was just to do this, I could have the pieces smashed together, but it's not going to produce anything that works. Whereas here, no, yeah, they would also be thinking through all of the necessary steps to have the final product that is being produced on this massive scale come together as is necessary. We talk about, in speculative science fiction or just looks to the future, about robotics and machines replacing organic workforces. Well, this is an example of it that in turn is building upon the unique details of the multiverse that I have constructed in terms of these books. For the most part, when I do try to draw on science, I in those cases like for there to be some drawing from actual, if only theoretical science or actual observed scientific phenomenons or whatever it is. Yet here this is a case where instead, because of the different rules that I've established for my reality in these books to allow for other things to work the way I want them to, this then opens the door for other inventions that specifically only work in this reality of the Ragnarök Chronicles, because it relies on Spec, which in turn relies on the Alpha Realm and the Inner Region as they attempt to coexist. Hopefully you have therefore found that interesting, just another bit of sciencey stuff, and there's other videos that you'll see linked in a playlist at the end here for other bits of technology and all this similar kind of vibe, or you can find videos on other kinds of bits of the lore, more couch stuff or species or history. There's a variety of things, different playlists that you can check out, or just see what the channel throws out at you as you go through it. Either way, hope you enjoyed, and in the meantime, before I see you again, as ever, just remember to keep on telling stories.